Recently, the landscape of action, sci-fi, fantasy cinema has honestly looked pretty bleak. Weightless CGI, actors who you can most definitely tell they're in a production warehouse by themselves, and honestly just overall very visually bleak looking films. And after a few years of cinema being filled mostly with these kind of films, I really feel like we needed a palate cleanser. You know, just something with that 2008 to 2016 era where these genre films really had the juice, you know? Now, the first time I ever heard about the creator was a few years ago actually, when The Batman first released. Cinematographer Greg Fraser was making a bit of noise around the filmmaking circles when we all caught wind that he was shooting a small indie project in Thailand and he was using the FX3 to film it. At the time, it was actually called True Love, and it kind of just sounded like a small budget rom-com, to be honest with you, and I didn't really think anything of it. Little did I know that that rom-com sounding indie project turned into one of the best original sci-fi movies in the last 2 decades. But instead of sitting here talking about subjective takes over the script or the core concepts of the film, I actually want to talk about the practical things that make this a good film. What I think Gareth Edwards did best here was honestly his approach to making this film. Again, totally disregarding the entire plot of the movie, I wholeheartedly believe that if you do the right things to set your film up for success, then your idea doesn't have to necessarily carry the entire film on its shoulders. And with the creator, not only did Edwards create a rich environment filled with tremendous world building and very unique aesthetic, but he did so in a way that made it feel so real. But not only did it feel real, but it actually was. Now you see, the creator actually had a really small budget in terms of Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking. Films like Indiana Jones and The Flash had $200 to $300 million budgets, whereas the creator only had $80 million to work with. So with this very limited budget, Edwards actually opted to take a much leaner approach to making this film.
The cost of building a set, like on a typical movie like this, is like, say, 200 grand to build a set. And if you get your crew small enough, it's cheaper to fly them anywhere in the world than it is to build a set. And so once you get it to that size, you start to be able to go, well, where's the best place in the entire world that we could set this scene? We actually did that and went to all these real locations around the world to film at.
With such a limited crew, they also opted to go for a very small camera package as well, shooting the entire movie on the Sony FX3. Now, thanks to the Sony FX3's second base ISO of 12,800, this allowed them to keep their lighting package to a minimum and really allowed for this unique freedom when it came to the on-set performances.
I don't know if you remember this with cameras, but you basically remember film stocks and you would get like a 100 ASA or ISO, and it would go up to 800 if it was dark. You might need an 800. Well, this does 12,800.
Wow.
So you can shoot in moonlight, and as a result, it meant that we didn't need big, massive lights. So we had these like LED lights that are just really lightweight. They're kind of featherweight. And so you know like how people hold booms on a set? We had our gaffer, kind of best boy, Nancy, was kind of holding an LED. And so we would light it by, as we could be really organic. If suddenly the shot looked like the actors had this freedom and suddenly the shot looked better over here, Nancy would suddenly move around with the light and Oren would be talking to Nancy through a little microphone. And we were just really fluid, organic. We'd shoot for like 25 minutes at a time, and it was like a very liberating experience. And it looks like a much bigger film than it cost because of that reason, because everything you see is on screen, hopefully.
And with this way of shooting, it actually allowed them to go back in post and kind of layer all the CGI and VFX over the top of all the footage that they shot.
And then once we've edited the movie together, we sat down with Industrial Light and Magic and James Klein, who was a production designer, and essentially photoshopping and painting over the top of those frames that were actually in the film, so that we weren't ever designing anything that wasn't in the movie, and we weren't building things in VFX that you never saw.
That's awesome.
And so it's a really efficient way of making a film.
All of this culminated into an absolutely stunning film that honestly looks just as good as any other sci-fi film in the last 2 decades. Outside of the technical approach though, I also feel like Edwards' philosophical approach to making this film was really special. Edwards actually recently talked about his approach and why it took him so long to make another film in a recent interview with Uproxx. That phrase, go big or go home, sometimes it means you have to go home. And so there's a reason it took 7 years for me to do another movie. I was just trying to get the right situation so I could make a film the way I felt a film should be made. I think the sentiment of waiting until you have something to say is actually quite beautiful. And then you pair this mindset with this leaner and more intimate approach that they took for the production. It leads to nurturing and caring for these ideas for over 7 years, giving these ideas the space they need to grow into something impactful and honestly really beautiful. And that is how you set your film up for success. If you haven't seen The Creator yet, I implore you to find the biggest screen near you and watch it for yourself. It's so worth the watch, and honestly, it's something that cinema really needed. To Gareth and the rest of the crew, congratulations. It's very well deserved. As always, thank you so much for watching, and